Nike, one of the most well-known shoe companies in the world. A company with a lot of ups and downs, accusations like forced labor to even owing $28 million to the country. By the way, this company stands out. Phil Knight, the man who studied journalism, but with everything up in the air, found himself on the dark side. By chance, he finally got interested in importing Japanese shoes in America. Phil Knight was born in Oregon, USA in 1938. The American man Phil Knight was wrapping his head around and deciding what to do for a living. As his interest in running was overwhelming, he decided to become a runner, but his age, a 24-year-old man, didn't match with his idea. He enlisted in the Army for a while, but after a year, he decided to enroll in the Graduate School of Business at Stanford University. Here's when his history changed completely once again. While working on a project to invent a new business, suddenly he wrote, "Can Japanese sports shoes do to German sports shoes what Japanese cameras did to German cameras?" You know, Phil had noticed that two Japanese camera companies, Nikon and Canon, had completely replaced with German cameras. Phil was somehow eager if the same thing could happen with running shoes. Although two great companies of that era, Puma and Adidas, had the top marketing in the running shoes industry, he found out that producing shoes could be somehow cheaper. So Phil invested in this assignment for his business class and found this chance as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to import the Japanese shoes into America. At first, his idea seemed somehow unreliable to his business partners, but Phil was always looking at the bright side. After graduating from business school in 1962, he found himself back home with his situation all up in the air. Phil had to do something for a living. As he was determined about his idea traveling to Japan, he finally traveled to there in 1962 to import Japanese shoes into the America. While he was walking around a city named Kobe, he stumbled upon an amazing pair of shoes that attracted him so much. The brand name was Tiger, made by a company called Onitsuka. Phil found the two criteria he needed: high quality and cheap product. Honestly, Phil fancied the shoes very much, so much so he decided to call the owner of the shoe brand and arranged a meeting with him. As he was nervous, he bought a copy of How to Do Business with the Japanese and memorized it. Despite being amateur enough to make mistakes during the meeting, he simply introduced himself as an American shoe distributor. As he'd already memorized some key statistics and facts about how to run a business, Phil Knight delivered a quite amazing presentation that even Japanese entrepreneurs became completely impressed. This way, the Japanese entrepreneurs were keen about partnership. By sending some samples to America, the partnership was going to be completely okay. After a couple of months, Phil noticed that no shoe samples had arrived yet. He got upset and thought he'd been defrauded. But one day, suddenly 12 pairs of shoes arrived. Phil was extremely happy and excited about it. To have a great business partner, he got in touch with his old coach, Bill Bowerman. Bill Bowerman was so dominated by running shoes. Phil showed those pairs to Bill and received worthy advice. Bill had a high level of knowledge when it came to running shoes. He was cutting open and making adjustments, stuff like adding more cushions or using lighter materials. After showing new samples to Bill, Phil Knight was eager to call Bill Bowerman as his future partner. Interestingly, Bill was extremely into these samples, to the point that he agreed to his previous student Phil Knight. Actually, for Phil Knight, Bill Bowerman was the most perfect business partner he could have, so they finally came up together to be the new co-founders of Blue Ribbon Sports. By investing about $500 each, they continued to work. They started to use all their money to order 300 pairs of shoes, at a price of $3.33 for each pair. Phil was finally able to progress his business with the connection of Bill Bowerman. Besides that, the affordable price of their products caused it to rise quickly, to the point that after a year, they were able to sell about $8,000 worth of shoes, and were all trying to drive all over America to sell their pairs of footwear. Phil Knight was extremely powerful with this success, and finally he had his real office for Blue Ribbon Sports. In addition, Phil recruited their first employee, Jeff Johnson, who later came up with the iconic name Nike. In 1996, they were capable of opening their retail store to sell their products. This way, customers felt very comfortable going from store to store, searching for their favorite pair of shoes, even some related books. On the other side, Johnson was taking care of the business, and Bill Bowerman was thinking about creative ways to improve. Bowerman was ripping Japanese shoes apart to see how they were designed and searching for possible ways to improve them. To the next class of products, while he was back to coaching and training the best athletes in history, honestly, he had a lot on his plate on that time. To attract visions, he wrote a book about jogging as well. Interestingly, this book became popular within a short period of time, selling millions of copies. After writing his book, he surprised people with another invention named Cortez. His shoe, Cortez, became the highest-selling pair ever in 1969, making a revenue of $300,000. Simultaneously, they were somehow over the moon by this unpredictable advancement. Things were going pretty well, and Phil even asked Onitsuka if Blue Ribbon Sports could be the exclusive distributor. At first, they said no, because they thought Phil's company isn't big enough to handle it. Moreover, they wanted someone with an office on the East Coast. Then Phil replied, "We do have offices on the East Coast, but to be honest, they didn't." Thus, Onitsuka accepted that make a deal with Blue Ribbon Sports. Phil made the best use out of this opportunity and ordered 20,000 more pairs to America. Also, to raise money, they tried sending leaflets but didn't get any support. Phil and Bowerman liked Onitsuka's shoes and thought Onitsuka was everything to them. So when they started importing, everyone liked their products to such a degree that they were capable of opening new Blue Ribbon Sports stores. Actually, they were ordering large amounts of shoes that Onitsuka wasn't able to make for Blue Ribbon Sports. That was because Onitsuka was even ignoring Blue Ribbon and somehow even sending them leftovers. That was not fair. Bowerman got angry, and Phil arranged an in-person meeting with a representative from Onitsuka named Kitami. Kitami suddenly accused both Phil and Bowerman of disappointing sales. In response, Phil showed Kitami a survey that almost 70% of American athletes were using this product. It was completely obvious that Kitami and Onitsuka weren't eager anymore about partnership. When Kitami stepped out for a moment, Phil found a mail showing Kitami was trying to see other distributors around America. Here, Phil noticed what needed to be done. Phil said, "We have a contract of about 1 year. What about that?" Onitsuka just suggested buying 51% of Blue Ribbon Sports. They said, "Sorry, but except this, there's nothing we can do." Phil was furious and constantly rejected their offer. After a while, Phil noticed that if he continued that way, there'd be no loser except him. It was the time when the story changed completely. Phil and Bowerman both thought about how they could revive the business once again. They thought maybe they could be more than just distributors. Phil and Bowerman agreed to start their own way of marketing. They got together to choose a name. First of all, Phil Knight suggested a name, Dimension 6. Obviously, no one liked that. Then Jeff Johnson said, "What about Nike?" "It's the Greek winged goddess of victory," he explained. At first, Phil wasn't into this name, but over time, Nike became Phil's favorite name. The next item was the logo. They ordered a graphic designer student to make a suitable logo for them, and she received just $35 for it. Honestly, their name and logo came out of nowhere, but today, this logo and name don't just compete with Onitsuka, but also with all the shoe companies around the world. As they were completely on their own, they started to come together and work for a new level of business. Phil told his employees, "We're walking on thin ice, and a small neglect can cause a big problem." This time, Phil established a network of manufacturers. In 1971, Blue Ribbon Sports changed to Nike, and they achieved more than $1 million. As they skyrocketed at the 1972 Olympics, they offered lots of their products to athletes, and suddenly, their revenue rose to $14 million in 1976. Then in 1977, they came up with $28 million. Things were going well, that Nike even became a fashion model for people. In fact, Phil's business was extremely at its best-case scenario, but a storm was brewing. One early morning, he received this crazy letter saying Nike owes $25 million. Phil thought, if this is right, we'll be starting all over again. But unfortunately, it turned to be completely true. It was all because Nike's competitors like Converse and Keds were scared if Nike would get the whole control of the American market. They brought the old archaic rule from before the Great Depression. Phil tried to find qualified lawyers, but after 3 years full of risk, they just made the situation worse. They produced this TV commercial telling their story, what happened and why they couldn't produce their favorite Nikes anymore, calling for support. Far from expectation, it worked, and at the end, they came to a settlement of $9 million instead of $28 million. This way, their sales again rose to $440 million. The company was now turning profits again and back in the market competition. Well, in 1980, the company just went public, and now Nike was able to solve its cash problems. With a net worth of $1.6 million, they started a new business with 2 other Chinese companies. It made them the first American shoemaking company in China. Simultaneously, they started making clothes. It didn't only help attract more people and customers, but also helped change one of the most noted sport companies around the world. Nike was making deals with very amateur athletes at first, because while these athletes were becoming global icons, automatically Nike was growing along with them. Most notably, their most lucrative deal was with Michael Jordan, a basketball player. Later, his shoe line, Air Jordan, had millions of copies sold. You might think Nike's story is just a story of victory, but this might change your mind. It was 1991 when business was booming in short. But one day, American labor activist Jeffrey Ballinger published a video showing Nike uses child forced labor. He claimed that behind closed doors, Nike forced them to work and live in slums near open sewers. Jeffrey published that the people working there weren't allowed to drink or go to the toilet until the end of the day and were paid only 1.25 cents, which was shocking. Later, in 2001, a BBC documentary uncovered child forced labor in a Cambodian factory under Nike. They were forced to work 16 hours a day. Obviously, this brought intense public outrage to Nike. All these differences brought Nike to the center of attention. With a dream of having a better pair of shoes, Phil Knight could fulfill his life dream and, besides that, create jobs for millions of people around the world. Thank you guys for watching. Until next time, take care.